Good morning. This is Jason Moss of the Georgia Manufacturing Alliance and Manufacturing News Network. We've got a really great call lined up. A good friend of mine, Russ Dunlap, he is a partner with Taylor English Duma, and he is our liaison with Taylor English, and he has been a great partner and friend of GMA. He's given us some really good insights on the legal aspect for manufacturers. Now, I'm going to let him tell a little bit of his background because, I've come to find out that, lawyers have very specific niches, and he feels a great niche for manufacturing, but he's reached out to the team at Taylor English and has brought some other industry experts that's going to add some insights about how manufacturers are dealing with the coronavirus. And guys, okay, so today is April Fool's, and this is not I wish this was a lot more lighthearted. If you heard the president's comments yesterday, he had about an hour, I think an hour and a half or 2 hour press conference talking about the status and the expectations for the coronavirus impact on America. And it's, it is what it is, guys. We got some tough times ahead of us, but we can pull through this together if we work together and support each other. And again, follow the guidance that's given to us about social distancing. I'm a big networking guy. I'm a social guy. I'm a big hugger. I mean, if you guys know me, I'm missing out. I'm having some DTs, not being around folks, but my wife is like, leave me alone. Just get out of the house, whatever. So, but we're going to try to make fun with this and have his, share some information that's beneficial. But also, again, this allows us to grow our relationships, although it be digital. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Russ Dunlap. I'm going to bring his screen up. Again, one of the other things that you can do in Zoom is you can change the view. You can either use speaker view or grid view. I'm going to have Russ be kind of highlighted, and we'll change over as we kind of change out our speakers. So with that being said, Russ, if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, about Taylor English and your role there, as well as what we're going to get covered today.
All right. Am I on?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Great. Like Jason said, thanks, Jason. My name is Russ Dunlap. I'm a partner at Taylor English Duma. We are a general practice law firm with attorneys from all over the spectrum, with expertise in all the areas that a general corporation company, manufacturing company, or any other mid to large size company could need. My particular practice is patents and intellectual property, which really hasn't been affected by the coronavirus that much. So my expertise is not as relevant to what everybody on the call is looking for. That's why I brought a team of people with me today that will speak on issues that you want to hear about. My hope is maybe while some of your engineers are at home, social distancing, maybe they're thinking of some new ideas that you can implement once they get back to the office, back to the facilities, and maybe then I can help you. But for now, I'm going to pass it off to my colleagues who can talk to you on some issues that you probably are concerned about. We have 3 attorneys with us today that will be talking. We have Mitzi Hill, who is heading up our coronavirus task force. She has been following all the news about the legislation that was recently passed and all the issues surrounding that. And she will probably speak for the bulk of the time. We also have Leanne Jones and Henry Quillian with us as well. They are 2 of our corporate litigators. They are following up on insurance issues and corporate and contract issues, and they can speak on that for a little bit. We'll leave some time for questions at the end. So I want all of you to think as the call is going on, what other questions, what other topics are you interested in hearing on? Because we can bring in experts on those matters in future calls if Mitzi, Leanne, or Henry can't specifically talk on those issues. We can bring the people to the call next week potentially that can talk on those issues. So with that, I'm just going to hand it off to Mitzi Hill, and she can talk on this issue for a while. She has all the knowledge that hopefully you're looking for. So with that said, Jason, can you hand it over to Mitzi?
Good morning. Am I live?
You're good.
Good. Thank you, Russ, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for being here this morning. It's an interesting time that we all get to get acquainted and meet each other and see each other's living rooms at the same time. That I think is probably unprecedented in corporate history. As Russ said, I am heading up our firm's coronavirus task force. My day-to-day practice is as a corporate technology lawyer, and a lot of that consists of data privacy and security work. And so I do a lot of counseling and advising on privacy laws and compliance. I do a lot of technology-oriented contracts, and I do a lot of just baseline corporate work about how your entity is put together and its relationships through contracts with other companies, either vendors or suppliers. Before I talk a little bit about the big legislation, I just wanted to take a minute, since we're on the first day of a new month, to do a little recap of the last few weeks and see how we got to where we are today. And I pulled together some notes. 30 days ago, New York had 1 case of the virus, right? Pretty remarkable. Today, it has more than 4,000 cases and nearly 1,200 deaths. Sorry, 40,000 cases and nearly 1,200 deaths. Georgia, I don't think we had any cases in 30 days ago, and today we have 4,000. For most of us who are office workers in Atlanta, our last full day in the office was Friday, March 13th, a day that in the rearview mirror seems fairly seems like an omen. And it was only 2.5 weeks ago, right? I mean, it seems like a lot longer than that. Some economists in the United States are estimating that 40 million people will be out of work by the end of April, by the time this is all done. And of course, we're now being told by the disease experts in the administration to anticipate that as many as 100 to 200,000 Americans could die over the coming weeks, even if we do everything really well. That is the really awful stuff. The less awful stuff that is still really bad for the clients that we represent is that they are going to be facing contract disputes as a result of all of the economic meltdown that's going around, whether it's rent or whether it's supply chain or whether it's services. Everything is being affected. We are seeing an uptick in hacking and cyber events, partially because bad guys like to capitalize on bad events, and partially because now everybody in America is doing exactly what we're doing right now, which is working remotely. And that creates a lot more threat vectors. We're going to be seeing insurance battles. Some of you may already be talking to your insurance companies about business interruption insurance and similar kinds of issues. That's part of what Henry and Leanne are here to talk about today. I'm sure that you have all talked about employee layoffs, employee furloughs, salary cuts, those kinds of measures. We're seeing that all over the board with our clients, both large ones and small ones. And there are also employee relations questions relating to how much privacy are employees entitled to these days if we are trying to protect the health of our workforce that is considered essential workforce. How many questions can we ask our employees? What can we tell other employees about an employee who's been diagnosed? Those are going to lead to litigation down the road. Because of all of this, TED put together a task force. TED is our internal acronym for our firm, Taylor English Duma. We put together a task force quickly. We've got employment, healthcare, tax, lending, real estate, corporate, insurance, litigation, and more working on it. We're tracking the multiple updates we have done on the virus and legal issues on a virus-related blog on our website, so you can get everything there. And as Russ says, we are happy to bring you subject matter experts in the coming weeks to address your various legal questions. So having said all that as the table set, I think what we've seen in the last couple of weeks since about mid-March is that state and local governments have reacted pretty forcefully and fairly quickly as the virus has made its way into the various states and localities across the country. There are shutdown orders now in at least 31 states, maybe 32. The last I checked was a week ago, and the schools were shut down in 37 states. It's now looking likely that those kids are not going to go back to school this school year. The vice president is talking about the Democratic National Convention being postponed. I mean, these are, you know, major events. So where we all live, the local officials did a pretty good job of responding pretty quickly. The federal response has been a little slower and a little more disjointed, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But Congress, at least over the last few weeks, has gotten really engaged and has started to take this very, very seriously. You may be familiar with the Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act that passed early in March. I think it was about March 10th. And what that did is it immediately created a slew of new worker rights for small workers at small companies, essentially opening them up to a great deal more paid leave for coronavirus related issues, both family leave and sick leave. That was a huge deal, and it was quickly eclipsed in the news by the legislation that we're going to spend most of our time talking about today, which is the CARES Act, C-A-R-E-S. It's, I'm sorry, my mind just went blank on what the acronym represents, but you can be sure it starts with coronavirus. The CARES Act is the $2.2 trillion with a T dollar stimulus bill that was passed late last week. It is about a 900-page piece of legislation. The chief intent of the bill was to get cash or cash equivalent liquidity into the hands of individual American families, small companies, large companies, certain very distressed economic sectors like the airlines, and to build on the worker rights that were addressed in the first legislation, the FFCRA. And those liquidity measures, what Congress did is it pulled several different levers. First, as you all know, many Americans are going to get a check in the mail, depending on their income. Second, there is a $350 billion lending and grant program set up for small businesses, which we will talk about in detail. And there is a $500 billion lending program set up for other businesses. We're not going to talk about that in detail. The rules for that haven't been released. And so we don't know exactly how the loans for that are going to work, who will be eligible for them, what the terms will be, all of that. But it is coming. It is an additional form of relief. So just know that it's out there. The final thing that Congress did in this rush to get liquidity into the hands of American companies and families was create a whole bunch of new tax deferrals or tax breaks. And we will talk a little bit at a high level about those. I am not a tax expert. We have one on the phone who's going to keep me honest, she promised, and who can talk to you in detail about those. So let's talk about the small business loans that the CARES Act created. There are two different loans that were affected or created by the CARES Act. You may be familiar with the Small Business Administration's existing EIDL loan. It's an economic injury disaster loan. Those are loans that are currently available. They've been available for years, unrelated to the coronavirus. They have been beefed up a little for the coronavirus, and they are available right now. So the CARES Act didn't create that, but it created some new benefits for those, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then the CARES Act created an entirely new loan/grant program called the Paycheck Protection Program loan. I will probably call that a PPP loan because that's easier to say. Important thing to know about both loans, you can, if you are a small business, meaning you have fewer than 500 employees, apply for both kinds of loans. You just can't use them to cover the same expenses. And so if you are looking at applying for those loans, you need to be careful about documenting your expenses and the proceeds of those loans and talk with your accounting professional about that. The other thing to realize is that the tax benefits that I referred to a minute ago, although they are widely available, there are a couple of them that you cannot take advantage of if you borrow under the PPP loan program. And so it's important to understand that you have a lot of choices that will be available to you, but you have a math problem to do in figuring out what is the biggest bang for your buck, which loan to apply for, or which tax breaks to go for, depending on your personal situation or your corporate situation. The EIDL disaster loan, which is the existing kind of loan, those are available right now. You can apply and get funding right now because it's an existing program. You apply directly through the Small Business Administration. You don't have to go to a bank. There's a $2 million maximum on that, and it's a 30-year note. Those loans are not forgivable. It's just like a regular loan in that you take the loan out and you repay it over 30 years or however long you take to repay it. But one of the new features that was added to them under the CARES Act is a $10,000 advance emergency grant. And that grant, you do not have to repay. And you can roll portions of an EIDL into a PPP loan if you are approved ultimately for both loans, and potentially get some of the EIDL forgiven. That is probably sufficient detail for purposes of this discussion, but just know that both loans are available. You don't have to choose one or the other. You just need to understand how they're going to work together for your particular situation. The new loan program, the PPP, those loans are not available yet. The legislation was signed last Friday by the president. Yesterday, the Treasury Department issued some informal guidance and a loan application for those PPP loans. Businesses can start applying for them as of this Friday. And we are going to, our law firm is going to publish this morning, if it hasn't already while we've been on this call, a law alert explaining what the Treasury came out and said yesterday about these loans. But the thing to know is this: it is designed as an emergency infusion of cash to help you meet payroll, rent, mortgage interest, or interest on other obligations for an 8-week period. And if you keep your payroll steady, you can apply to have that loan forgiven. That is, free money. It is literally designed to be a temporary application of government funds to private business so that we can all keep up and running until such time as the economy is starting to move again. The forgiveness rules are still being written, but what we think is that if your payroll remains steady by head count, not by the actual people. So Mitzi doesn't have to have the same job pre and post loan, but somebody needs to have, there needs to be a full-time equivalent of Mitzi. If you had 100 employees before you took the loan, you need to have 100 employees by June 30th, which is the measurement date that they're going to use. If you keep your payroll steady, you can apply to have the loan forgiven in full. You must document how you used the proceeds of the loan. And so you'll have to have payroll records and benefits records and tax records and rent statements and utility statements and things like that, showing how you applied the proceeds of the loan. The amount of your loan that is forgiven, whatever that ultimately ends up being, is not going to be considered taxable income. So you will not pay taxes on that forgiven amount. And the maximum amount of the loan, we've seen slightly different wording from the statute last week and the Treasury guidance that came out yesterday, but it boils down to 2.5 times your average monthly payroll as measured over the year prior to your loan. So if your monthly payroll is $1 million, and payroll is defined in the statute, you are eligible for about a $2.5 million loan is what it applies to. And if you keep your payroll steady, meaning you used to have the same head count before and after, you can apply to have that $2.5 million loan forgiven. So that is a pretty extraordinary benefit. We are urging companies to look at both of these loans and go ahead and apply for both if you think you need them. Certainly apply for the $10,000, the EIDL and the $10,000 advance grant if you need cash right now. We are advising companies to start pulling together your payroll records for the last year so that you can figure out what your average running payroll is, so that you'll know what you qualify for under the PPP that you can now apply for on Friday. You should be able to go to your preferred bank with whom you have a relationship to apply for that PPP loan. It is done through the banks, unlike the first kind of disaster loan, which is done through the SBA. Be sure you're keeping good records about how you spend your money. Be sure you're talking with your accountant. And the other thing, this is not related to the loans, but if you have any existing lines of credit I think it's probably a good idea to see whether you can go ahead and pull it down or increase it, because everybody's going to be facing a liquidity crunch the longer this goes on. And so if you have money available to you that you can borrow and then pay back without penalty if you don't tap into it, that's probably not a bad idea either. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial person, but I sit on some boards where the organizations are doing just that. Okay, those are the basics of the small business loans, and we are going to leave time at the end for questions. I know I'm running through this pretty quickly, but I want to just be sure that we cover everything. There is also tax relief built into the CARES Act. I'm not going to run through all of it because there are about a dozen, maybe 10 different tax breaks or tax deferrals that were built into the CARES Act. For example, the paid leave that was created by the first legislation, the FFCRA, you can now get an advance refund of the credits that are due to you as an employer for paying that paid leave. The effect of that is you can keep the money in your hand because you've effectively now got a paid credit, so you don't have to pay and wait for the credit to come back to you if you're paying on paid leave. There are some new rules about net operating losses that will allow you to write them off in full rather than at the 80% level, and to carry them back for 5 years prior to the year in which you incurred them. Those will apply to the current tax year and the prior to. The alternative minimum tax credit has been revived for a temporary period of time. You can now deduct business interest expenses up to 50% of your adjusted taxable income for 2019 and 2020. And there are a couple of other small measures as well. The two that I really wanted to highlight, though, these are two that are widely available, but if you take advantage of the PPP loan program, you may not be able to use these or use them in full. There's an employee retention tax credit. So you are paid a credit based on the qualified wages that you were paying before and after. That is not available to borrowers under the PPP loan. And so that is an example of the math problem that every employer will have to do in figuring out, would I rather have the loan or would I rather have the tax break, which is the bigger benefit for me. And then there is also a deferral of employer payroll taxes. Your portion of the Medicare and Social Security tax can be split into two payments that, instead of being due this year, are due half at the end of 2021 and half at the end of 2022. That is not available to you if you have taken advantage of the loan forgiveness under the PPP. I know that was quick. I want to be sure we leave time for Leanne and Henry and for questions. But that is a brief overview of some of the many extraordinary measures that Congress has put into place pretty quickly over the last week to try to make sure you can either hold on to cash or borrow cash temporarily in order to keep your payroll running, your rent paid, all of those kinds of things. Thank you so much for having us today.
Fantastic, Mitzi. I really appreciate all the information. That was a lot of information.
I know.
I was on a conference call that was an hour and a half long yesterday, and you recapped beautifully in about 15 minutes, an hour and a half. And so one of the things that, again, we really appreciate Taylor English Duma and your support in what you do and bringing clarity to a really confusing spot. And I love the blog that you guys have set up. We've built a little page on our website about resources, and we've captured a lot of the legal briefs that you guys have put out on the thing. And then also we're going to make sure that we link back, because we're not able to pull all that information over at one time, but we're going to link back to your live site. So we're going to, again, thanks for putting this stuff together and bringing clarity into the confusing world. So, and I'm sure you've got lots of documents that are backing all that stuff up that'll allow us to have something to do with all this extra time off that we have.
Jason.
Yes.
Matt Abernathy here. I just wanted to note one thing that I also included in the chat over here. My wife's a banker, and she just got off a phone call with the Treasury this morning and the Georgia Bankers Association. The Georgia Bankers Association is putting out guidance that due to high demand, it's likely that only 25% of non-payroll expenses will be forgivable under the PPP. So if you're looking to try and get a loan for rent or operating expenses that are non-payroll related, it's likely that you'd want to do that under the EIDL.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
That's correct, and that was released late yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of the stuff is fluid, guys. So I mean, we all got to be pretty flexible, and roll with the information that we've got. So, well, Russ, I want to open this back up to you. Kind of who we got teed up next for a chat, and the other piece, Heather, if I could have you kind of read through the group chats, and I'm gonna bring you on in just a minute to make sure that we get everything, all of our questions answered on that. I do not have the capability to read and to think and to listen all at the same time. So Heather, if you could help us out on the chat side, that'd help out a bunch. And I'll bring you back on after our next speaker.
Yeah, and we have a few attorneys that are also on the call. So hopefully, while Leanne's talking, if you have a question, maybe one of our other attorneys can keep an eye on the chat and answer your questions if they have the relevant experience. So next up, we have Leanne Jones. She's one of our corporate litigators, and her and Henry are going to kind of split time a little bit, talk about some corporate contract issues and insurance issues.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Hold on just a second, Leanne. We got you muted. Stand by. I'm going to unmute your line here. I think I can unmute it. Actually, you should be able to see a little unmute. Let's see. Yeah, there you go.
I think I am unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Great. Thank you, Russ, Mitzi, and Jason, and thanks everybody for being here this morning. As Russ mentioned, I am a business litigator, and what I really like to say is a dispute resolution specialist. I work on business litigation. I'm also a mediator and arbitrator, and a lot of what I do is advise my clients about how to resolve business disputes where litigation is one of the tools in my toolbox, but not the only tool. I think in this current environment, we all have our unique situations in our businesses, but probably the one universal experience that we're having is business disruption. There is a disruption of our usual way of doing business. And those disruptions obviously can result in different legal liabilities. What I am seeing, in my opinion, is pretty strong that the businesses who do well in this new environment, the ones who weather the storm effectively and come out in a good position on the other side, are the ones who effectively manage the disputes, the business disruption issues that come up, and handle those on a proactive basis. Where we see a lot of the disputes are arising are, and you guys are probably seeing this in your own businesses, are around the supply chain. Vendors that are unable to deliver on raw materials, other things that you need to in your process, and then that is causing a chain reaction and an inability to perform under existing supply agreements. That is a significant issue. I was on a call the other day where one person was talking about kind of the rolling effect we may see, for example, with suppliers from Southeast Asia, that this is not a problem that's going to resolve itself in the next 60, 90 days. This may become, in effect, a new normal. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. Other potential legal issues, I think Keaton raised this in a question that caught my eye, is different liability issues, whether with your employees, and we could have a whole session on employment related issues, but also on different third-party liability, whether you've got a failure of a piece of equipment that you use, or you've got a purchaser of your products and that sort of thing. Those kinds of liabilities are going to continue. And typically in the regular world that I operate in, we handle a lot of those disputes in the courts. We advise clients about the legal rights, knowing that litigation, a lawsuit, is a means of enforcing contract rights that you have and obtaining recovery when another business partner doesn't or a vendor doesn't follow through. The new reality is right at the moment, the courts have, a lot of the courts, the ones here in Georgia, have kind of hit the pause button. And the legal relief is not necessarily going to be fast. I think you all, any of you have been involved in lawsuits know the legal machine doesn't move as quickly as we would like anyway. And it's going to move a little more slowly for a while. In following some of these issues, it's going to be a while before jury trials resume. If you can imagine, in the current environment with the questions about health risks and quarantines and what have you, it's hard to imagine a court sending jury summons to individuals and forcing people to come sit in a room with others and deliberate, not just for the next 3 or 4 months, but perhaps as long as 6 months or a year. We just don't know. So the resolution to disputes may not come promptly through the courts. And we're looking at how can you navigate these issues. Without belaboring all of that, I would kind of suggest that there's a few things to keep in mind because we all are going to be facing these inevitable business disputes. One, be proactive. Identify the potential contract performance issues that are coming down the pike. Identify those contracts where your company has performance obligations. What's the status? What do the contract provisions allow as far as termination, reworking those agreements? Look at your supply agreements. Where are you getting your raw materials? Where are you getting your component parts? Look at the status of those vendor agreements. And then what we are working with clients to do is triage those risks. Where do you see problems coming? How can we resolve those by being proactive and communicating with the other parties? And then when you have a failure of performance, when a vendor fails to come through, when they're unable to perform, or you're unable to fulfill a contractual requirement, what are your legal rights? What are the potential ramifications? How can you mitigate those risks? And then which are the disputes that might require a more traditional, either litigated or private dispute resolution, arbitration type of resolution. So as far as keeping this kind of short and to the point, those are the things to have your eyes on right now. Another factor, obviously, to consider is looking at all of your vendor relationships and identifying those business partners that may be at financial risk and maybe into a workout or a bankruptcy scenario, because that can impact your ability to recover on any of the contractual damages, things that we typically would look to when a business partner fails to perform. There's going to be issues with the financial ability to perform and protecting your rights there. So those are just kind of some of the issues to highlight. It's kind of impossible to answer all of those in this setting, but those are the ones to keep your eye on to kind of address the question that Keaton's already raised. There are some questions about what if, and this kind of highlights the third party or employee claims. We're hearing, do we provide masks for our workers? How do we make the workplace safe for the employees that are coming to their jobs every day? They're trying to keep you up and running. The availability of the masks that the healthcare workers need is not there for you. What if you supply a non-compliant mask? Is that helping or not? And what are your legal liabilities? Those are issues that, as the liability lawyer in me that represents businesses, that's near and dear to my heart. I litigate those kind of disputes. And, we can't provide legal advice right now, but I would say be reasonable. Look at the data, look at the information that's available follow the CDC guidelines. If the CDC, and I understand they're looking at that, if the CDC says, you know what, we don't know if these are effective, but we think it's better, then make those available to your employees. But in all of those situations, your best guide is get information, get accurate information, and make a decision that you believe is in the best interest of your employees, is the most reasonable based on the information you have. But I think there will be a variety of different liabilities that come out of the different choices that we all make. And that might be a good time to hand off to Henry, because I know a lot of the questions that we're hearing relate to, can insurance help me? And can insurance help my business with the different gaps that are coming up as far as covering the financial ramifications of the different liabilities? So maybe now, Russ, is a good time to hand off to Henry. And Henry, I set you up.
Hello, everybody. I've been unmuted as according to the screen. So good morning. Sorry about the circumstances in which we need to talk to each other. I am the head of our construction group, which consists of about 6 people full-time, or mostly full-time, where we have over 200 years of construction experience. But construction covers virtually every part of the every aspect of commercial law in the United States because of its many facets. One of the facets along the way has been insurance coverage, and I also worked at a law firm that did extensive insurance coverage work, both for companies suing insurance companies and for insurance companies, prior to coming to Taylor English Duma 11 years ago. So I spent a lot of time fighting with or for insurance companies, depending on the specific case at hand. And there's several very important things to remember about insurance. One of which is hopefully you have a very strong broker who provided your policies and has at least a general knowledge of what they sold you. Sometimes brokers know intensely what they sold you. Sometimes they have no idea what they sold you or why they sold you what they sold you, except for they wanted to sell you a policy. Another thing is that insurance policies sometimes have coverage that have nothing to do with the name of the policy itself. So some of the things I might discuss might actually be covered in one way or another. When I mean covered, meaning there may be addressed as a subject matter in a policy, and there may or not be insurance coverage because of what you purchased. There are base policies, and then there are all sorts of bells and whistles that can be stuck on insurance policies, and those bells and whistles make all the difference. So first of all, generally speaking, you need to be aware that insurance is a state-based undertaking. Each state in the United States regulates insurance, and sometimes the states themselves require various policies to contain different provisions. Every insurance contract is indeed a contract, and so it depends on what the insurance company agreed to provide to you that makes all the difference. If the insurance company messed up when they agreed to provide you insurance and they put ambiguous words in, those ambiguous words are construed against the insurance company and in favor of the insured. So sometimes insurance companies think they did not provide you coverage when in fact they did, because they don't even know what their own policies say. And I've litigated against insurance companies where both the vice presidents of claims wrote a very persuasive letter saying there was no coverage. Then they hired an international insurance coverage firm that wrote a very persuasive letter saying that there was no coverage, but all you had to do was walk through the policy, through all the endorsements they added on and took off, and lo and behold, there was very clear coverage for a claim. Now, that was not related to coronavirus, but it's an example of how insurance companies sometimes don't even know what they said in their own policies, because it's sort of like the telephone tree type thing where somebody tells the insurance salesman this is what the policy says, but the policy doesn't actually say what they're being told it says, and they haven't read it themselves carefully enough to know the difference. Policies are very state specific. So, for instance, right now, well, there is generally out there on a lot of policies, property policies, meaning policies that insure your actual physical property where your company is operating. A lot of those policies have what's called a virus and bacteria exclusion. Some of them do not, however. Also, for instance, in the state of New Jersey, there is currently pending a proposed bill in the legislature that will wipe out that exclusion, even though the insurance companies have issued policies with that exclusion. What impact that would have, or whether that's constitutional or not for the state legislature to wipe out an exclusion that's already been agreed to between the parties, that's for future determination. But the point is that the state law, the law of the state where the insurance policy was issued, makes a lot of difference. And in that regard, if you have a multi-location company, it may be that the insurance policy is actually controlled by a state other than where you happen to be. So it might be a Georgia facility of a New York company. It might be the New York law that applies to the insurance policy. And I've already mentioned that there are endless numbers of endorsements that could be added or taken off of a policy. That could include broader coverage. It could include lesser coverage. If you sat with your insurance broker and all these different ideas were being thrown out about what you might want to throw in your policy, and you said, give me the works, add everything on, some of the things I'm about to talk about might be covered. Whereas if you went to the cheapest policy available, you can be pretty assured that a lot of these things are not covered. But let's just run down some of the types of claims that arise as a result of this coronavirus and all the impact on industry. Some of them are fairly straightforward. For instance, if you had a big event and you bought event cancellation insurance, then that might cover the losses suffered as a result of having the event canceled. And that could be both the provider of the event and also possibly a participant in the event who is supposed to get paid for being at the event. There could be, as part of your property policy, could be, not highly likely, but we'll have to see how these sort out because there are lawsuits being filed all over the nation addressing these provisions in property policies. There could be claims of business interruption, which is essentially insurance that's intended to replace a part of the revenues that you'll lose because of an event that happens. However, business interruption insurance generally requires a direct physical loss or damage to covered property, which means, in a sense, your building has to be damaged somehow in a physical way in order to trigger the coverage. Well, viruses don't naturally damage a building, at least in the historical sense. Obviously, there'll be claims that say if a building becomes uninhabitable because the virus made it uninhabitable, people may claim that's a damage to their building. And of course, that's what the virus and bacteria exclusion was intended to address in some ways. But some policies don't have that exclusion. Within a business interruption coverage, there may be side issues such as whether a civil authority, let's call it the police or the National Guard, somehow prohibit the use of the property because of whatever's going on. Now, if there needs to be direct physical loss or damage, that might not be triggered. But I was looking at a policy yesterday that had something called a gold property extension endorsement. And that actually had a provision that said if somebody within 2 miles of your building has an event that results in the civil authorities preventing people from accessing your building, then you might have business interruption coverage. Never seen an endorsement like that, but that's what that particular policy said. So if somebody else down the street has a fire, even if it's caused somehow by the coronavirus, let's say the claim would be that some employee went off the rails and lit the building on fire, and then the civil authorities somehow blocked access by my client to their facility, there may be some coverage. So you have all sorts of interesting scenarios that could come up. So really all you can do is collect your policies and don't just look at the title of the policy. If something happens, consider whether there might be coverage under that policy. And you'll really generally need to talk to your broker, hopefully a sophisticated one, and also potentially a lawyer. There's also workers' compensation insurance. Now, associated with that, there are workers' compensation laws, and those workers' compensation laws might actually provide a bar to recovery by certain employees making claims for injuries that occurred while they were at work. And that it is possible also for a non-employer, for instance, a general contractor where a subcontractor's employee has made a claim, to take advantage of the workers' compensation bar, which prevent the claim being made as a matter of liability, and then could either block coverage or provide coverage. We're going to get to questions here very quickly, so I'll simply say that there will be subsequent third-party claims such as liability claims for directors and officers, discrimination, EPL claims, etc. So have all your policies available for review when these claims arise. Thank y'all very much.
Henry, that was awesome coverage of what's going on in that space. I tell you, I never thought we've got a business owner plan for GMA, and so I'm gonna dig ours out, and that'll be some fun reading for the evenings at about 47 cups of coffee. But we're gonna dig into that. Again, thanks for prompting that piece. But I will touch on one other thing that we found. I mean, we're an association, but we're as much in the events business as anything out there. So, I mean, last year we did about 120 events and had about 3,500 folks attend these events. And of course, we got our event is still scheduled September 15th at the Cobb Galleria. We're pressing on as if everything's going to be fine, which might cause some interesting comments over to the side here, but we are one of the things that we found. I'm a member of the Georgia Society of Association Executives, and something that was very interesting for us because we connect with not only association executives in Georgia but nationally, and all these big shows that are that got canceled. I mean, shows with 30, 40, 150. There's actually one that I talked to somebody that ran a 400,000 person show with attendees. Most show, because you can buy show insurance. You mentioned that was pretty cool, but you can buy insurance for a show. But every policy out there, from everything that we've been able to hear, both at a state level and a national level, all of them have exclusions for communicable diseases. And so everybody that thought they had coverage and it was covered, nobody planned. I mean, other than the insurance company, nobody else planned for that as a possibility. And so they thought they were covered, and they, had have everything banked. So they're trying to figure out, who pays who, and so we're trying to figure out how that's going to flush out. I mean, I'm sure that stuff will be tied up for years. But one of the things that, and Russ and the whole team at Taylor English is kind of shared with me, and their, the mentality, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but, litigation is kind of the last straw. I think that all of us are in the same boat together, and if we try to do, I mean, a lot of my philosophy is based on a rule that's written in a book long time ago, that, you treat folks like you want to be treated, do unto others. And that's the philosophy that I'm taking. And I think that if we as a society take that philosophy and commit to treat people like you want to be treated, and do the right thing on the front end, I pray that eliminates a lot of, bogging down the courts with stuff that, ultimately in the long, in the grand scheme of things really doesn't matter. You know, I mean, we got to do the right stuff, and we know that we might not get supplies in, and we might not be able to hit deliveries, and that impacts everybody in the supply chain, and we're really seeing that now. But we, if we commit as a community and as a country to just try to do the right stuff, I think that'll eliminate a lot of the headaches. So with that, that's, you know, Jason's philosophy on law, and that's probably why I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to pitch this back over to Russ, and love to get your input and see what kind of questions also that we have. And Heather, did you have anything else that was popped up on the questions that we might not have got addressed, either you or Russ one?
No, it looks like most of them were answered. It was on maybe 1099 workers and who's getting to collect the head count on that. So it looks like they mostly got answered, I believe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Russ.
You know, like I said earlier, I don't have the expertise to really talk on this subject that much. So I would rather open it up to any other questions. We have about 5-10 minutes or so left on the call.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't know, Jason, if you want to just open it up to questions.
Yeah, feel free. I mean, if you would, feel free, if you you can either add them over in the comment section, or you can just unmute your phone, and it should bring up, you know, if you got any specific questions. I know that Mitzi covered a ton of information. Again, we're going to put some of the links in our page. We have a page, if you go to the manufacturing news, there's a resources tab in there that you can click on, and the majority of the information that's provided there has come directly from Taylor English. In there, we're also going to put a link on that page, as well as the show notes on how to get to their blog, because they got a ton of great information about how businesses need to respond and react to, you know, challenges that we're all facing. I know we've got a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe as far as pay and unemployment, and the CARES Act, and the 3P plan loans and stuff like that. So who's got the first question? Yes.
Has anyone seen any recent litigation involving the interpretation of acts of God as it relates to this virus? In the context of a force majeure, obviously.
Okay.
You know, this is Leanne. I'll jump in on that, and Henry might have some thoughts. We haven't seen those issues resolved, but I agree with you that I think those cases are going to be out there, and people are going to be taking that position as a way to try to get out of contractual obligations. You'll probably see it in these event contexts, but probably in others. Just when you look at the traditional analysis, this situation doesn't fit perfectly, but that never stops people from trying. So I think that is absolutely one of the issues that's going to be litigated.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
This is Henry. An issue that might come up is, and a lot of people have already raised this, is that because you could write this into a force majeure clause expressly, for instance, impact on employees relating to a virus, some people will argue that because it could have been in there and it wasn't, then you failed to negotiate that to protect yourself.
Cool. All right. Who else has got a question?
And if anybody else has not a question on this topic, but are interested in other topics, there's other legal issues, please let us know as well.
Yeah, and please, if you would, please chime in on the group chat there. Any topics or things that you would like to get covered that we have not covered yet. So I'll give you a lineup. I'll give you guys a quick update on what's going on with GMA. So we're doing 6 calls a week. On Monday, we're doing a town hall, which is open to everybody, and it's just, you know, kind of the topic of the week. We're going to kind of recap where things are at, and lay out a game plan. That's at 10 o'clock on Monday. On Monday at 2 o'clock, we're doing a task force call. So any companies that have things that they would like to add resources, supplies, people, whatever, to help combat the coronavirus. Had a lot of manufacturers call me and say, we got masks, we got, a variety of different things. How can we get them to the right hands? We're connecting. Now, we're not government related. We're not part of the state. We're completely independent association, but we're passing all this information along to the governor's office, and they're taking it from there. But we're going to have those calls every Monday at 2. So Monday at 10 is the town hall. Monday at 2 is the task force. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is going to be a variety of other topics that we're gonna be able to share with folks. And we're going to mix those up right now. I mean, this week we've done HR. This one's legal, and then on Tuesday we're going to be doing Thursday we're doing one on finance, and we're doing a fun Friday. And that fun Friday makes definitely helps lighten the load a little bit. We do that at 4:00 on Fridays. And 4:00, if you hadn't plugged into that, if you didn't plug into it this last week, we have a blast on it. Everybody turns on the camera, and it's just a casual kind of virtual socializing, and kind of telling the best jokes or experiences of the week, and just kind of get to know each other a little bit better. So again, those are the 6 calls that we'll be doing each week in support of our manufacturers across the state. Again, the mission for GMA is to support Georgia's manufacturing community. That mission has not changed. We're just changing the tools and the delivery option of that. I've had a lot of companies trying to figure out how they can help support GMA, and each of these calls are going to be a sponsorable event. We got to keep the lights on, guys. I mean, I'm gonna be very candid with you. We're doing the same thing as a lot of companies out there. We've stepped up to the plate. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to serve the community, and we're committed to do that. And we want to make sure that, if there's something else that we can be doing that'll make your life easier or provide you information that you're looking for, please reach out to us and let us know what we can do to make that happen. So with that, was there anything else that we can, is there anything else that we can do on this call before we wrap it up? Okay, so I will wrap it up with one thing. We are going to put a picture of, stand by just a second. We're going to do something really cool. If you have not done this before, this is a GMA kind of thing. And everybody's got the cameras on. Turn your cameras on. Turn your smiles on. We're gonna do a quick photo, and then we're going to post this on LinkedIn. And we want everybody to like and share what your favorite part about the day was. So stand by. Everybody smile with your face, and wave. Hold your hand up like that. Everybody wave. Don't wiggle it. Freaks the camera out. Smile and wave. Smile and wave. One more time. Smile. Bigger smile than that. Try that. All right, cool. So we're going to post this on LinkedIn, and this is just a way to share, how we're staying engaged with each other. And we would love to hear what your favorite part was. And if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we're here for you. And if you just want to chat, give us a call. We'll chat with you. I mean, I know a lot of folks out there that don't have a big community. It's our time as leaders to be able to give back into the community, and I challenge you with that. And I would, and we're wrapping up all these calls with the same way. Our leaders, our local leaders, our community and political leaders, these guys and gals are faced with some tough times, and regardless of where you stand politically, I'd encourage you, to pray for your neighbor and pray for the leaders and the decisions that they're making, because we got a tough time ahead of us, and we got to commit to work together. And we can and will pull through this, but we got to work together as a community to make it happen. So with that, we're going to sign this call off. There will be a brighter day. We're going to come to the next deal. It's been another great day at GMA, and I want to thank each and every one of you guys for being part of this day and part of this call. We'll see you at the next event. Have a great day. See you guys.